and welcome to GameSack, the choice of a new generation. And this time we are looking at some delicious product placements in games.
Yes we are. These are going to be some good, wholesome, organic reviews with no filler and unprocessed.
Indeed. So let's get to some of these scrumptious ass games.
This is Noid for the NES. A lot of you might be too young to remember the Noid, so I'm going to fill you in. Back in the late 80s, when you ordered a pizza for delivery, a lot of times it would arrive with a smashed up box, or it would be cold and just plain nasty. Domino's created a character called the Noid who was responsible for all the bad things that could happen to your pizza, taking the blame away from them completely. They had a ton of commercials with the Noid trying to ruin Domino's pizzas, but he failed every time and he became a huge hit. He had t-shirts, toys, and even a video game which I'm playing right here. This game started in Japan and was called Kamen no Ninja Hanamaru. It had nothing to do with Domino, so when it was localized for the US, Capcom changed it to star the Noid. The first few times I played this game, I really hated it. The difficulty was up there and I died a lot. The Noid can only take one hit before he's dead, and the majority of the time it feels like a cheap death. Like here, did I really fall into the water because I'm pretty sure I can still see the platform I was trying to land on. After dying so many times and so quickly, it's easy to see how I was totally annoyed. No pun intended. I kept playing though because that's the kind of stand-up guy that I am. The game became a lot easier, and that's because it's all pattern-based. Enemies appear at the same spot every single time, making memorization the biggest challenge. Yeah, I still died quite a bit when I started a new level, but after 2 or 3 times I had the patterns down and was able to get by. Besides the cheap deaths, the Noid actually controls well. I had no real problems with the platforming, and there's a ton of it here. Even on the ice levels, I still was able to control him pretty well. For your weapon, you have a standard yo-yo. It's powerful and kills most enemies in a single hit. It doesn't have a huge range, but it's good enough to keep enemies from getting too close. You can also collect scrolls in each level. If you hit the big scroll before you collect it, it will give you a sub-weapon. The small scrolls will fill up a gauge on the bottom of the screen for said sub-weapon. I rarely use these, even though they're really effective at killing enemies that take multiple hits. Probably the most annoying part of this game is the boss fights. Well, I guess it's a boss fight since there really aren't any other bosses around. The whole battle is a card game about an eating contest. On the bottom of the screen are small ovals. Your enemy chooses a card with a number on it. All you have to do is make sure your number is larger and you win that round by eating extra pizzas. Those pizzas sure look like hamburgers, or maybe they're personal pan pizzas from Pizza Hut. Whoops, wrong company. Anyway, when you fill up the ovals at the bottom of the screen, you win the fight. As far as the aesthetics go, the graphics are average. They're bright and colorful, but very uninteresting to look at. The whole first level is weird because the town and docks are bobbing up and down in the water instead of vice versa where the water should be bobbing up and down. And the music complements the graphics with its uninterestingness. Surprisingly, the only time you see dominoes at all in this game is on the title screen. Other than that, there's nothing. I would have thought there'd be dominoes, flags, and pizza boxes all over the place, but it's just the Noid, and if you're not familiar with him, he looks like he could be any other random character. Does anybody out there actually remember the Noid? Does he make your tummy rumble for some delicious Domino's pizza? Not mine. I don't think I've eaten Domino's for about 15 years.
Alright, this is Pepsi Man on the original PlayStation by Kid. This was only ever released in Japan and it's pretty wacky. You play as a short-lived mascot Pepsi Man running around collecting Pepsis. Honestly though, I've always kind of preferred Coke over Pepsi, and this game kind of makes me glad I do. You start out by watching some fat white guy buy himself a Pepsi from a vending machine, and then for no reason he hears music as he drinks the soda. Definitely some exciting stuff. You then press start and you're at the fat guy's home and his refrigerator is stocked full of Pepsi. Pepsi is this guy's religion. He grabs a ton of Pepsis and tells you to get ready to play. Then you get a synopsis for the first stage.
There are a bunch of people gathered in front of the vending machine. They want Pepsi.
That's right, the vending machine is out of Pepsi and people are about to riot. You need to help them out. You run through neighborhoods grabbing all the Pepsi cans that you can see. You don't control your momentum, you can only move left and right as well as jump and slide to avoid things. You even run right through people's homes. You can do that though because you're Pepsi Man, damn it! The amount of sheer chaos going on in these neighborhoods reminds me of Paperboy, so it definitely gets some bonus points for that. Sometimes you'll run through a shed and get an item which does something unique. Things like a trash can which reverses your left and right controls, or maybe a skateboard which makes you jump higher. When you trip and fall down, you lose a lot of time. Sometimes you even get set back to the checkpoint. You can see how far you have to go by the meter in the upper right corner of the screen. Beat a couple of stages and you get kind of a bonus stage that reminds me of certain levels in maybe Crash Bandicoot or Mickey Mania. Avoid obstacles and don't let the giant Pepsi can squash you. The second stage is much more sinister, with fires breaking out everywhere. Your mission this time is to make your way to the trapped victims and deliver delicious Pepsi so that they can be refreshed while they wait to be rescued. The game gets incredibly tough and you'll fail a lot, but fortunately there's unlimited continues. At first it's kind of addictive, but sadly it gets old kind of fast. The graphics are pretty bare bones, even though that this was a fairly late release for the system. The music definitely kicks ass in its own special way though. Between rounds you'll get an FMV of the fat guy chugging some Pepsi. This is disturbing enough to make anyone want to switch to Coke.
Have a Pepsi.
No thank you. So is it worth importing? Not for me, but maybe you'd like it. There's lots of M&M games on different systems, but let's focus on M&M's Shell Shocked on the PlayStation. You're about to start your vacation, but something's going down at the candy factory. You start out by playing the yellow M&M as he drives to the factory to fix things up. It kind of plays like a less interesting version of Pepsi Man. You just move left and right, making sure not to touch anything. Well, you can touch the boxes. These give you lots and lots of M&Ms, and for every 100 that you get, you'll get an extra life. There's also things to hit which can help you, like a spring to make it over a big jump. After you arrive at the factory, the gameplay changes. Oh my god, it's a poor man's Crash Bandicoot. You even have the same spinny attack as Crash. Sadly, the collision detection here is awful and you'll be dying a lot. The good thing, I guess, is that you'll probably never run out of lives since they're just so damn easy to earn. Instead, you'll just get bored really fast. There's nothing special about the graphics, sound, or music here. Hell, maybe a Skittles game would be better. There's Darkened Sky on the GameCube where you actually collect Skittles, and although I've never played it, it's gotta be better than this.
Here's MC Kids for the NES, developed by Visual Concepts and released by Virgin Interactive. Firstly, I've got to wonder why this is called MC Kids and not Mick Kids, you know, like McDonald's. Secondly, I've got to know why there are 2 kids in this tent and only 1 sleeping bag. So these kids are reading a book about Ronald McDonald, and this is how the game starts out. You meet Ronald and he tells you that the thieving bastard Hamburglar has run off with his magic bag and you have to save it. You start out on an overworld map. To progress to the next world, you have to find a certain number of hidden cards. Each level has one of these cards and a few other ones that do different things. Mick and Mac control exactly the same, so there's no advantage to either of them. They actually control fairly well, and this is good since there's a ton of platforming to do in each area. You'll be going all over each level, up and down, trying to find these hidden cards, which for the most part aren't really hard to find. With a little persistence, you won't have any problem. However, I did die quite a bit playing this game. There's lots of times where you can't see what's below you, and it's usually a big gaping hole in the ground, and I fell into these so many times. Look, there I go again. The good news is that there are levels with lots of 1-up blocks in them, and if you want to, you can keep entering these levels and build up your stock of lives. I was a little upset that there's only one way to kill enemies. You pick up these blocks and throw them at the enemies, and it takes care of them with no problem. But be sure not to go back and get another block for another enemy because the one that you just killed will regenerate. The developers should have included some other way to kill, like a head stomp or a weapon of some sort. A lot of times I just tried to jump over enemies to avoid them rather than kill them. It works for the most part, but not always, as they seem to frequent small platforms. There's a couple of interesting play mechanics here as well. There's platforms here and there, and when you run on them you can invert yourself in the level and play upside down. The cool part about this is that it's not overused. Another interesting thing is when you're playing through levels with clouds. When you go into clouds, you can see your character's eyeballs so you can tell where he is. Now that's ingenious. So the game looks good with lots of color, and I was pleasantly surprised by the soundtrack. There's only a couple of songs that play over and over again, but they're still pretty enjoyable. Honestly, I expected much worse for a McDonald's game. As far as product placement goes, this game doesn't overdo it. The cutscenes contain McDonald's characters that are all long gone today. So if you don't know who the Hamburglar or Grimace are, then don't worry, you're not missing much. Other than that, you'll see the McDonald's arches in the background here and there. I've got to admit, I had a decent time playing this game and would actually say it's worth your time to try it out. And it goes really good with a Happy Meal.
This is Chester Cheetah on the Genesis. Now, Chester Cheetah was introduced as the mascot for Cheetos cheese puff thingies in the 90s at the height of the Tood era.
It's not easy being cheesy.
However, his video game by Kenneco is not that great. Fortunately, I've covered it before, so I have an excuse just to blast through it as quickly as I can. You play as Chester, of course, and in most levels you're looking for parts that belong to your cool mobile. You only have to worry about jumping and a dash once you get it. I really don't enjoy this game very much, but I've got to admit that it doesn't play horribly. It just requires lots of patience. The graphics are bright and colorful, and the sound quality isn't bad. There's also a version on the Super Nintendo called Too Cool to Fool. It's pretty much the same game, only with slightly better graphics and, in my opinion, worse control. It also feels a lot slower. Just get the Genesis version if you're craving for a Cheetos game. There was even a sequel called Chester Cheetah Wild Wild Quest. This one is much worse. You now die in one hit instead of having the luxury of a life bar. And you never know what can kill you. You can bounce on these guys to kill them, no problem. But don't you dare try landing on a pig. If you grab a bag of delicious Cheetos, you eat them when you get hit and that'll bring you back to life. However, if you die in a boss fight, you're not going to be able to go back and get a bag, so good luck. You can do a weird air swim thing, which is odd. You even get super imaginative enemies like a scarecrow that moves up and down. Such creativity. The graphics and sound are both much worse this time around as well. Again, there is a version for the Super Nintendo, and it's actually better than the Genesis version, but it's still an awful game. Alright, Dave, how are you liking some of these games so far?
How am I liking it?
Yeah.
Ba-da-da-da-da, I'm loving it.
Excellent. So do you want to cover some more?
You darn right I do. I'm hungry for more reviews, man.
Well, these games will really satisfy.
Are you ready?
You've played MC Kids. Now it's time for Global Gladiators! This is the exciting Genesis follow-up to MC Kids, and once again, it's based on McDonald's. And yes, once again, you can play as Mick or Mac, and they play identically. Keep in mind that despite being able to choose your character, this is a one-player game only. So the story goes that you two are admiring how cool the Global Gladiators are. Suddenly, creepy-ass Ronald McDonald appears and outright kidnaps you. You arrive in a strange world where you're left to figure things out on your own. Thanks, Ronald, you creepo. Anyway, you're armed with a slime gun and you're here to stop pollution. And getting rid of pollution is what McDonald's has always been about. In the first level, you destroy slime enemies who shoot slime back at you. I'm not sure why your slime is better than their slime, but apparently it is. In later levels, you're fighting actual animals because animals are bad for the environment. They've got to go. You collect tons of tiny little McDonald's icons, which are called arches. You need to collect at least 30 of them to finish a level. If you collect 75, which is a lot harder than you'd think, you'll be able to play the stimulating bonus game. In here, you must catch the recyclables and put them in the proper recycling bin. Really? I think I'd rather play a video game where all I do is homework. Anyway, sometimes there's pollution-making machines in the level that you can destroy. Destroying these doesn't seem to make any difference except for points, so there's no real need to seek them out. The levels are pretty damn big and will take a long time to get through as it is. There are 4 worlds with 3 levels each. Control-wise, it's typical of a 16-bit Virgin game. And that's not too bad. There's a lot of momentum here. You start out really slow and eventually get faster and faster. However, when you press the D-pad in any direction, the screen will snap towards that direction. It's very annoying, distracting, and not at all delicious, though I understand their reasoning for doing it. You see, they don't want you to be too close to the edge of the screen at any time. I just think they could have handled it better. Playing the game, it's often difficult to avoid the projectiles flung by the enemies even in the first few levels. Fortunately, you have a life bar so you can take a bunch of hits. There's also hearts which will restore your life and a decent amount of checkpoints in each area. There's also a ton of blind jumps and this sucks. But to be fair, you can often see if something is below you by pressing down before you decide to jump. Sometimes though, you're just gonna need to take a leap of faith because there are more than a few invisible platforms you'll need to land on in order to advance. And sometimes things that appear like solid ground definitely aren't. Wasn't expecting that. The visuals are pretty good for their time though, not outstanding. There's a decent amount of color here and there's some attempt at variety between each level. The animation is also pretty good. The music, which is done by Tommy Tallarico, sounds really good, but the compositions themselves really aren't that special. Tommy Tallarico made it his personal mission to use as many samples as possible, including his own voice. Overall, I feel that while the game plays quite well, it can get kind of boring a little bit more quickly than it should, mainly due to the lack of variety. It's worth trying out though, and it's definitely a better anti-pollution game than Awesome Possum.
I'm awesome.
It also appeared on the Master System, Game Gear, and even the Amiga. I'd like to quickly mention McDonald's Treasureland Adventure for the Genesis. Stupid Dave talked about this one in a previous episode. This was one of the first games made by Treasure, believe it or not. You control Ronald McDonald himself on a quest to find pieces of a treasure map. The game isn't long, but there's a lot of variety in each of the areas that comprise each world. Ronald blasts magic from his hands to defeat enemies and uses his scarf to grab onto handles. These can also propel him up to higher levels. The graphics are colorful and the music isn't bad either. Overall, it's definitely fun. If you're gonna play a game about McDonald's, this is the best one you can play.
Seven Up the soft drink had more than a few games come out that starred Spot. Spot is actually the little red dot on the logo and he was in quite a few 7-Up commercials. Let's start out with the NES game called Spot the Video Game. This releases a puzzle game and it's just like the board game Othello. There's 49 spots on the board and your goal is to occupy the most spots when the game ends. The game is over when there are no empty spots to fill. The cool thing is that you can play up to 6 players at a time. If you choose, you can turn animations on, which makes Spot animate at each turn. This is fun for a bit, but luckily you can turn it off and this speeds the gameplay up exponentially. Honestly, I really have a fun time playing this game and I think it would be fun with a group of friends. You can also get this game for your Game Boy, which is still fun but lacks all animation. And of course color. Spot made it to the 16-bit generation as well. Cool Spot was released for both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. This is a side-scrolling platformer, and the object of each level is to collect enough little spots to unlock a cage at the end. Collecting 60 spots will do the trick, and if you get 80, you get taken to a bonus level. The bonus level has you doing the same thing as you do in the main game, but inside a 7-Up bottle. The game is genuinely fun to play, and I really like that Spot can shoot in 8 different directions. I also like that he can shoot through solid objects in the background. This makes killing enemies a breeze. After playing a bit of both versions of this game, I've got to say that the SNES version is the better of the two. It has brighter graphics with more details in the backgrounds, transparencies, and a camera that's smooth. The camera on the Genesis version almost ruins the game. It snaps back and forth like a rubber band and gets annoying very quickly. But the Genesis does win in the sound department. The music has a much richer sound quality to it. Either way, the soundtrack is pretty good. Tommy Tallarico is responsible for the soundtrack and he did a good job. There's also a version of Cool Spot on the Game Boy and it plays well, so if you need Spot on the go, you can have it. There's also Spot, the cool adventure on the Game Boy. This is basically MC Kids, but with Spot instead. Try it if you want MC Kids on the Game Boy. There's one more Spot game that I'll mention before we move on. It's Spot Goes to Hollywood for the Genesis. For whatever reason I'm not sure, Eurocom decided to go from a nice side-scrolling platformer to an isometric disaster. The object of the game is basically the same, and that's to collect a certain number of spots to clear the level. Also included is a bunch of other stuff to collect for points and to refill your health. Controlling Spot is very difficult here. Making jumps to other platforms is hard, and I was never confident that I'd make it to the other side. Just moving Spot around is annoying, and I really felt that the controller was fighting my inputs. Graphically though, the game looks pretty good. What's not good is trying to maneuver around each level. A lot of times I'd fall off edges because I didn't see they were edges. Sadly, I didn't play very much of this game due to the frustration, and I'm pretty sure I won't be playing it again. This game was also released on the Saturn, and it looks better, but it's still just Spot Goes to Hollywood. Stick with the previous games as they're all so much better than this one.
Burger King Pocket Bike Racer on the Xbox is a racing game, as you'd probably expect. This is one of 3 games published by Burger King back in 2006 and sold at their stores. This one's actually a kart racer. It finally lets you fulfill your dream of racing around a Burger King parking lot. But that's not all. You also get to race around neighborhoods and other random places as well. You can also play as several different characters, including the King and a Big Mac, or a Whopper, whatever. There's a chicken character, but honestly, I'm surprised there's no horse character to choose. The power-up and item system in this game is pretty strange. You power up the meter on the right side of the screen by navigating through colored pylons. This increases the meter. Once a certain weapon or item is lit up, it can be used. You can also cycle through the items just in case you don't want to use the topmost one. These items are generally ineffective. The meter on the right also serves another purpose, and that's to give you a speed boost. Hold down the B button and you'll speed ahead as the meter drains. The A button also acts as a dedicated drift button. Honestly, I don't really care much for the item system here or the controls. The track design also makes me long for a delicious Whataburger instead of Burger King. Still, the graphics aren't too bad for their time. They're even in progressive scan, which surprised the hell out of me. In fact, all these Burger King games are. Sadly, the frame rate is all over the place. The music is just awful. Holy crap, is it bad. Does this sound like good racing music to you? Okay, how about this one? It's a little bit more energetic. So Burger King not only harms your intestines, but your ear canals as well. Even the sound effects are bad. Why does it sound like I'm screeching my tires in an echoey parking lot even when I'm drifting on a dirt hill? This one's really not that exciting, but it definitely is one of the better Burger King games. Big Bumpin' is another Xbox game from Burger King. I feel bad for anyone who ever bought this. Do you like bumper cars? Well, I sure as hell hope so, because that's all this game is. Man, I don't even like bumper cars in real life, and it's even worse in video game form. Just roll around and bump into other players as you slowly begin to decompose. This is a crappy minigame trying to sell itself as a full game.
Does he have a license for that thing?
Sneak King is the final game from Burger King. Just look at this creepy guy. Now he's peeping in someone's window. Hell, maybe this will be an excellent survival horror game with the Burger King constantly stalking and trying to kill you. No such luck. Instead, it's your mission to deliver scrumptious Burger King delicacies to a certain number of people in a given area. For some reason, you need to be sneaky. People's field of vision is represented by the blue cones. Fortunately, they can't even see 10 feet in front of them and they have no peripheral vision, so it's pretty easy to move around without getting seen. If you run, you make more noise and their field of vision increases slightly. Anyway, you need to sneak up on the people who are feeling hungry. And you can tell who's hungry by the icons above their head. And of course, they're craving something from Burger King. Who wouldn't? You need to surprise them with food because walking over and handing it to them just isn't enough. Who the hell wants to eat food that they're not surprised by? You can even hide in lots of different places and just hope that someone hungry eventually comes by. If you don't get to a hungry person in time, they'll faint for a bit and it's all your fault. I guess this sawmill only hires type 1 diabetics. There's tons of missions that you can do in this stage, all basically the same thing, but the gameplay is just too boring for me to do enough of them to find out if there's another location. But I assume there is. These games also had versions for the Xbox 360. I don't know if they looked any better or not, and honestly I don't care. Metal Gear Solid doesn't have to worry about any competition with this one.
Here's California Raisins for the NES. Don't go looking to buy this game anywhere since it was cancelled before it was released. Developed by Radiant Software and to be published by Capcom, this title was going to cash in on some of the hype. Back in the 1980s, the California Raisins were a big deal and probably boosted the sales of raisins exponentially. Who doesn't like claymation raisins singing and dancing to I Heard It Through the Grapevine? Anyways, let's take a look at this game. You play the part of a raisin trying to save others in the Raisin Band. They were kidnapped by another band called the Wild Bunch. What an intriguing storyline! I'm hooked! The game plays as a typical platformer where you wander around large levels trying to find items to help you in your quest. You can shoot your enemies with what appears to be grape juice. Shooting randomly will also uncover musical notes to collect. The only thing you're missing is some sort of double jump. That would have been very helpful in a lot of spots here. Other than that, the game is just okay. Climbing vines can be difficult, and platforms at times seem to meld into the background. In real life, I'm not a big fan of raisins. I much prefer my grapes to be crushed and fermented. The character that you control is really ugly. I really don't want my hero to be a wrinkly-ass grape with sunglasses. I'm not sure why this game was cancelled, but maybe Capcom came to the same realization that a raisin is just not an attractive character to play as. If you have the means to play this, then sure, the ROM is out there, so why not? I'm using an EverDrive to play it on my NES for this review. If you don't have the means to play it, then just don't worry about it. Just like real raisins, you're not missing much.
Alright, those are some delicious games for you. Let me ask you.
Hey, wait. Lego my ego, man. I mean, my green tea. Sorry.
Anyway, let me ask you, Dave. Do games like MC Kids and stuff make you hungry for some delicious McDonald's?
You know, Joe, they really don't.
Really?
You know? No, because I'm actually just want to play a good game. I don't care about what they're trying to push. How about you?
No, I am not hungry for some Burger King or McDonald's or even thirsty for some Pepsi.
That's right. What about you guys? Do any of these games with product placement in them make you want to go out and buy that product?
And what are some other product placement games that we may have missed? Let us know, and in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, you ready to do this?
Dude, I'm always ready to do GameSack.
All right. Hello and welcome to GameSack. Today we are...
Hold on a second, dude. We got the same shirt on.
Yeah, we do.
And it's
cool.
Tatsujin, man, you know? Nintendo hardcore fanboy?
No, it's Truxton, dude.
No, it's a word. It's like gaijin or otaku. It means Nintendo hardcore fanboy.
Dude, it's Truxton on the Sega Genesis.
Whoa. Oh my god, it is Truxton. It's the same logo. I'm wearing a Genesis shirt.
Yes, you are. Ready to do this?
No, I'm not. I feel really dirty. I'm gonna go take a shower. This is disgusting.
Hello and welcome to GameSack. Well, I guess today we're talking about single-player games.